Hey there, Matt McQueenie of the Mix Minus podcast coming to you. And I wanted to kind of talk about an article I saw yesterday about Glenn Beck of all people. There's a great application on the iDevices, and I believe it's on Android, though I don't think so. I think it's just iOS devices. And for those who don't have those, you can find a website for this app. It's called longform.org. Came across this website a couple of years ago, got really into long form articles. So these are articles that are in the, several thousand words range, and they have to do with a real in-depth kind of take on a subject. They're the kinds of articles you'll see in the New Yorker, in the Atlantic, in New York Times Magazine, really in any magazine that commits itself to what is long form journalism. And the really interesting thing with long form journalism now is that as technology gets more intense and short bursts and Twitter and Facebook updates, there really is a need for long form journalism. We really need to have the ability to take a deep dive into a subject. And to take that deep dive gets you real deep into almost that sentiment of reading a book, that great feeling of when you just get immersed in it and you get lost. And there's nothing that really the technological short burst communication, reading stuff can catch with that. And I think with short burst stuff, you're always catching up and you always feel like you're behind. And the chronology of feeds are always kind of coming over you and taking over your being in many ways. That's very dramatic, I know, but it makes you feel like you're always missing out, that hashtag FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's something that's real. And long form journalism allows you to step back, settle into a subject, and get that feeling of reading a book without reading a whole book that, can be 2, 3, 4, up to 1,000 pages. These will typically take you anywhere from about a half hour to an hour based on the length of those articles. And they just get you deep. And one of the issues with it when you get real into long form journalism, and longform.org, longreads.com, thebrowser.com, they are these curated platforms that bring you the best long form content from across the web, from across the publication sphere. And you can kind of decide which ones you might want to read because they are a commitment. Most of us really only have at most a couple of hours in the morning, a couple hours at night to devote to content that is not our day, is not our responsibilities. It's really the stuff we love. And that's between TV, audio, text. So when you dive in and you want to read something that's going to take you a half hour or more, you want to really love it. The good thing is there's only so much long form content coming out. There's a lot of it that just kind of you're shocked because there's so many places vying for your eyeballs. But when you jump into them, and it's something I've done, I've really gotten away from newspapers. I've talked in the past about the Yahoo News Digest kind of being my quick burst, what's the news of the day content application. I read that. I was reading the New York Times every day for several years, but I kind of wanted to commit to long form journalism because you are going to get a full feel of what the content is, of what the subject is, of everything that's absorbed in it. You're gonna read something that someone probably spent 6 months on, if not more, maybe a little less. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but somebody really spent time on it. They've traveled to the place in question. They've traveled with the subject if it's a profile, and they've really gotten deep in it most of the time. And that kind of well-rounded context adds to a story something that the daily grind of newspapers just simply cannot. And that's not a downer on newspapers. Newspapers have a real struggle because they need to provide that long form journalism aspect to their daily news. So they need to be not only reporting, but analyzing on the run. And I do think the New York Times does it well. They give you the news, they give you the analysis on a daily basis, they give you the opinions, whether you agree with those opinions or not based on your kind of political hue. We'll see with that. I tend to agree a little more with it. I know my father likes the Wall Street Journal, things like that, which can maybe be a little more conservative. But they also have, on the weekend, more of a long form feel. They try to be a magazine, a weekly magazine, kind of a monthly feel like the Atlantic, and they try to be a daily. So I absolutely understand what they're going through. It is not easy. And it is a great content place. And to have somebody commit to your content for a half hour to an hour, you're doing well. And the majority of places that do long form content well, they are having people read every single bit of stuff that's going on in that magazine, because there can be long, there can be shorter long form, there can be kind of leader columns, which are in the hundreds of words as opposed to the thousands, and maybe they set the stage for the content to come. But it is a great thing. And so with the long reads, longform.org, and in their beautiful reimagined app that just released, I'd say in the last month or so, beautiful app. It has a great curated experience to the top stuff out there in the long form realm. Totally recommend it. It has plugins to be able to save to your read later apps, whether you're talking about Pocket, Instapaper, Readability, all those down the line. And again, all those pretty much have free versions. So they have a premium version and a freemium version, and the freemium version gives you plenty of stuff. There's some little things like searching through your articles in those apps that the premium gives you, and maybe saving your articles for forever, they say. We'll see if that's true. But the freemium, I've never had an issue with it, and I love them. There was a time where I was having everything kind of through an RSS feed send to my long form apps, but then I got completely overwhelmed, so I stopped that, and now I just choose what goes in. And one of the articles I did choose from my long form app, because they have the most popular of the day, and then they kind of have staff picks, and then they have a feature where you can follow great long form writers. So they're a great platform to get into this sphere, and it is awesome. One of them I came across, and I don't know why I chose to do it, but I did, because most of the time if someone does a long form article, it's going to be worth your time. You just have to trust it. And you might look at the subject and go, there's no way I'm going to really appreciate that or understand that. But if somebody spent the amount of time to put that together and the amount of words and kind of sweat equity to get it up, it's going to be worth it. These are people who are paid. They're like long form assassins. They're paid to do unbelievable work. And many times you'll see the same names across all the long form publications, whether you'll see a lot of the same names doing New York Times Magazine articles or Atlantic articles or New Yorker articles. So they're kind of commissioned to do pieces on something and to spend the time to do it. Real interesting world. But the one I came across was Glenn Beck, of all people. We remember Glenn Beck from the 2000s. He kind of became the rallying force in what felt like the conservative movement in many ways. He was on CNN first, ended up at Fox News. He'd cry. He'd have almost conspiracy theorist sentiments to what he's saying. And so for someone who's a youngster, when I was in my 20s, growing up around that time, he's somebody who completely seems antithetical to everything you could believe in. But you know what? The guy gets eyeballs. And as we come back to that long form aspect, people who can get eyeballs and keep interest in many different mediums, whether you're talking about books, audio, video, those are superstars. And I must give the guy his due. He is a superstar. He proved it by being on cable news like that and having shows that people really watched. He proved it by creating books that are bestsellers, by creating, he's now into movies and all kinds of things. I mean, in many ways, someone like Howard Stern would make fun of somebody like Glenn Beck, but they're both two sides of the same coin, really. They're both amazing media entrepreneurs who know what people want to hear and can keep people glued into that content for hours on end. And that is something that nobody can take away from you. And we're really in a time now where content is there. It's personality based. It's the Bill Simmons in Grantland. It's the Nate Silver in 538. Some say that's not doing so well, but still that idea. It's the David Pogue going to Yahoo and taking over Yahoo Tech. It's these curators. I can't read all the news, but I can go to the people I trust to have them tell me what the news is in that subject field. Across the board, it's happening. And that's why I've said in the past, I think Yahoo's doing a good job, because they're hiring really good journalists and then allowing them to curate an experience, write content, give a multimedia kind of overlay, whether it's video, audio, text, and then disseminate it through my favorite news app now, Yahoo News Digest, as I had said. And they're giving them the opportunity to do that. But you have to believe in people who can do it. No matter if it's a slant of political ideology, whatever, that you agree or don't agree with, if massive amounts of people are doing it and on top of it paying for it, and that's why I kind of put the Howard Stern with the Glenn Beck idea. Howard Stern went to Sirius. People said, how is he getting $500 million contract over 5 years, $100 million a year? How is that happening? It's because he brings people with him. He is a star. He is going to mean revenue. He's going to mean profit. He's going to mean people and buzz coming into your world and living there. In cars, you got Sirius. On your phones, you got Sirius. You got On Demand. I treat the Howard Stern Show almost like a podcast in many ways now, where I don't even listen to it live. I wait till later in the day. The episode is uploaded. I download it, and then I listen to it like a podcast so I can finish the whole thing. That is amazing. Those things are 4 hours, basically. And he's keeping me locked in for 4 hours, 3 times a week. He used to be 4 and 5 times a week, but he's locked in there. He's doing great. And so people would say, oh, he's way overvalued. Well, then why did Sirius at the end of the first 5 years pay him $400 million over the next 5 years? They know his value. The value of content and curators can never be undersold. And that's why I think when I came across this Glenn Beck article, I said to myself, this is something I'll read. I don't know where Glenn Beck's been. I remember him as this guy. I did not watch him, so I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I hated the guy because he was just completely crazy and all this stuff. He's crying on the air. He sounds like a conspiracist. But he is somebody who was to be reckoned with. I remember reading features about him, and so many people are reading him. So many people are following him. He really is a media superstar. He's a media entrepreneur who can create jobs and content out of whole cloth, and it's things that people want to commit their lives to. That's going to be the thing that they read and they listen to all day, and they trust this person to tell them the world. So this article, it was in D Magazine. You'd never come across something like D Magazine in your normal goings on. But again, having a curated app, just like a curated app made by, or a curated experience, media experience made by a media superstar, an app like this ends up being a curated experience by a newsroom of people who tell you what the best stuff out there on a daily basis are in this long form realm. And so I came across this Glenn Beck article, and I was completely entranced by it. Really interesting stuff. So since he left, the realm of terrestrial TV, I'll call it, almost just like with Howard Stern, everyone used to say he was on terrestrial radio, and then he went to Sirius and nobody heard from him again. Yeah, right, except those 500 million and then 400 million. And with Howard Stern, he started at Sirius with, I think, about 700 or 800,000 subscribers on that platform, with millions on XM. He chose to go to Sirius instead of XM. There was some kind of issue that happened where Sirius made an offer and XM balked. XM could have had him. But Sirius, he went there. He built up a base to the millions, and the majority of the people came for him. And I think if he leaves, many will leave with him, because podcasts offer a lot of stuff that the Howard Stern experience does. And I think there's only one Howard Stern. If he leaves that Sirius, I think a lot of people will leave with him. But people went there. Millions of listeners came on. He even had a TV show where people would pay a subscription to. People pay for him. Sirius is somewhere in $10 to $15 a month. By the way, if you call Sirius and you have a full paying subscription, call and threaten to cancel, and you'll get half off. You got to wait through, and you got to go through several steps of people until you get to the cancellation department. Once you get there, they're going to offer you your subscription for half off. Just kind of stay the course, hold your conviction, because it's going to feel like you're going to get canceled, but you won't. So I've been paying halfway for a while. But he went there, and people pay for him. They pay for all of his content. Since his TV show has gone away, I'm not sure what happened there. I haven't got a full idea of that, but people pay for it. They love it. And he got to the point where he built it so much up that Sirius and XM ultimately had to merge, because can you really have two radio stations that are based on satellites in space that are bringing content? No, that's the type of thing where efficiencies happen in a merger. They did merger. Sirius got the upper hand because at the time Sirius had more. It was a zero-sum game in many ways. They were going to come together, but a lot of people probably lost their jobs. And Sirius was the one at the top because of one person, really, because of Howard Stern, because he created such a buzz around Sirius where it made it an unstoppable force. It made it a place that was special, that some people wanted to pay for premium content on. And so now it's somewhere upwards of 20 or 25 million subscribers across the two platforms. So if you really think of Howard starting, he had 700,000 to 800,000 when he came on. Overall, the Sirius platform did. Now it's over 20 million. That is somebody who makes a difference. And I see that with Glenn Beck. He was on cable television, which I guess you could kind of say is more of a mainstream media, even though it's not broadcast or network television. But he was there, and he left to do his own thing. And he built his own network. It was first, I think, called Glenn Beck TV or GBTV, and now it's called theblaze.com. And so we're all sitting here thinking, oh, we got, everyone else has the last laugh. Glenn Beck is not doing anything anymore, because it feels like they're in the forest, because it feels like they're not being, they're not making a mark, but they are, because a niche audience these days can make a mark for you. And the word on the street is theblaze.com has 300,000 subscribers paying $10 a month, $9.95 a month. That's a lot of money. Glenn Beck has built an audience who wants to consume his content to such a degree. And if you're one person with a bit of a news organization and you got multimedia content and you got people paying almost $10 a month, 300,000 people is a lot. 300,000 people is not a lot on CNN. It's not a lot on Fox News, but it's a lot when it's your own thing. I mean, think about the fact Piers Morgan on CNN, he was an utter failure in those words. On his show when he tried to take over for Larry King, his show was getting something like 300,000 viewers on a night after the kind of buzz of the opening of his show had ceased, and he got more into his cruising altitude. So you're looking at major failure in one sphere at 300,000 viewers, and then you're looking at major success in another sphere. It's all based on where your frame of reference is. It's based on if you're a huge aircraft carrier like CNN and 300,000 is a failure, or it's if you're a startup and you came from nothing, you got people paying $10 a month for 300,000. Now, probably CNN, if they had people paying for a subscription to CNN, that might work out more. But if you're paying for eyeballs to sell it to advertisers, that's not very good. So Glenn Beck has really built something up, and I think there's something really cool to that. The idea of making your own news network out of nothing. I mean, this is what we all kind of aim for, no matter who says when they're in the podcasting sphere, no matter what they say about, oh, it's just a hobby, it's this. Everybody wants to be somebody. Everybody wants to be a personality that people are gravitated towards, that people love to watch, that people love to listen to. And that's really what you ultimately want to do, no matter if you say it's a hobby. You say it's a hobby because you have an inferiority complex, because you're afraid to say this is what I want to do. And so you say it's a hobby, and then you work and you do it, hoping it takes off, and then you can go, oh, shucks, it made it. But this guy left. First of all, he moved to Texas. He had some kind of religious experience in a field somewhere, walking around, where he decided he was going to move to Texas because it almost had a great origin story that aligns with his libertarian bent. And so out of nothing, he moved there. Wasn't from there. He's also he became a Mormon in '99, which is interesting. But he grew up in Washington, Seattle, and so he moves to Texas, and he builds this really big empire, this news studios that has everything there. And the guy creates 200 hours of content every month. He's constant. He's got radio shows. He's syndicated on 400 stations nationwide. Raked in $90 million himself last year, which they said is more than Oprah did. Pretty good. And Oprah tried to start her own network. Where's OWN been? I don't know how OWN's done. It seems almost to me to be dead. And again, making OWN in a broadcast world is a failure. Making the Blaze.com in the Glenn Beck world is a success because of the frame of references, because of the platform they start from, and the expectations that are bred within them. So he has a daily 1-hour program. He's got his radio show. Again, 200 hours of original content every month on theblaze.com. That is value to 300,000 subscribers. So somebody who's paying that money to his site is not paying money to a Sirius or to another subscription site, maybe to a newspaper. But this D magazine thing kind of says it's the Huffington Post with a libertarian bent, ostensibly. Add to the fact, Glenn Beck, 12 best-selling books, multiple genres, they say, fiction, nonfiction, self-help, children's picture books. He's all over the place. He has a clothing line with jeans that retail for $160 and polo shirts for $65. That's a little tacky and kishy, but it is what it is. He's got a movie studio he's working on where he's making stuff. The kind of import of his website, where he broadcasts live on the radio 15 hours a week, does the TV show for another hour. Alexa.com, which is a site ranking place where you can kind of go and look up sites in a public realm. It doesn't give you full information. You need your own analytics to do that. But they put his site, theblaze.com, above Bloomberg, Gawker, and Reuters. Reuters. So we're talking that level of reality. And this was a guy who was basically out of work in the year 2000. And it's stories like this that you always need to keep your hope alive and your dreams alive. You never know at what point your inflection point is. You never know when you feel so down that nothing's ever going to work out, that that could be the point where things start, because you reached a frame of reference in your mind. I love this word, frame of reference, but you reached a point in your mind where you see things differently. You see things differently from the bottom of the barrel than you do from the mediocre level, or the glass half full, glass half empty. When you're at the bottom, you see it different. Maybe you have nothing to lose. Maybe your risk aversion is kind of different and out of whack, and you just can push through anything because it's your livelihood that's at stake. It's what you need to do. And also, when you get into something that's your thing, you dive for it. You almost live to constantly create, and everything starts and ends with you, and it's fun. It becomes addictive to see how many views you're getting, how many downloads you're getting, who is interacting with it, who's sharing it, who believes in your frame of reference, who believes in your thought process. It's addicting, and it's almost like it pumps the endorphins up to an insane level. And so this is a guy who's done it. He says there's no way you could get from where I was in 2000, broke, never done talk radio before. By the way, he was doing like a Z Morning Zoo type thing. So he reinvented what he does. Never done television before, nothing, to 10 years later, he says 500,000 people. How is this happening? He brings up the religious aspects of it, which is fine. But it's amazing. And these are the stories I like. Whether I don't believe in what your story is, what you're propagating out to the world, disseminating out to the world, and maybe I would. It's funny how preconceived notions carry over, where you just say, I don't like this guy, and you never actually watched it or gave it a chance. I know that with Howard Stern, and that's why I try to be careful with this kind of stuff. People who commit to a show like that, there's a reason so many people are listening to it, and so many people spend 4 hours listening to it. We're not all creeps and deadbeats, whackpackers. We're people who understand good content and live for it. And that's kind of what the Howard Stern show does. And perhaps that's what Glenn Beck does. These people, it's like what Bill Simmons does. It's what all of these kind of it's what Andrew Sullivan does. That political reporter and kind of personality. They are people that others want to follow and listen to. And they want to hear their kind of bent on the world. And that is something that just, it's fascinating to me. And it's something that you just can't talk about enough in this time of difficulties and finding jobs and recession. And you look at someone like Glenn Beck, this idea germinated in his head, and what is he? I wonder if there was in this article some kind of if there's a staff thing. No, there's no staff thing, but there has to be at least dozens of employees, if not 100 or something. I mean, I don't know that straight off the bat, but he's creating jobs. He's creating a world out of his head. And it's just amazing to do it on video, audio, content, written content. I can't tell you enough. It really is. People don't think of it this way, but it's Bill Simmons, it's Howard Stern. He's up there with those folks, and he's making almost $100 million a year doing it. So we knew him as the Tea Party guy, but now he's just the populist, and that's what they kind of say. He goes where the popular sentiment is, and that's a really great businessman, because you look for the audience niche, you look for a world that can be, I'll use the word exploited, but I don't mean it that way, that could be leveraged, we'll say, and you find a way to, like a fracker, go down into that shale bed and find oil and pull it up and make a living. And isn't it funny that he's doing it in North Texas, much like the Barnett Shale with the frackers did. Good book, by the way, The Frackers by Andrew Zuckerman. Just finished that. So this was cool. I enjoy talking about this. Check out this article. It was like D Magazine about Glenn Beck. One of the few profiles that's been done on him in a while. It's always funny to me with profiles and people who are media conglomerates, if you call it that. They very rarely will they do profiles. And actually with Bill Simmons, he'd had some profiles done when Grantland started. I don't enjoy when they're profiled. Howard Stern, I don't enjoy when they're profiled. I don't want to hear someone interview them. I look for their take on the world. So many times a profile just doesn't do a lot for me if it's someone I'm interested in. Glenn Beck is not someone I watch, so a profile worked, but it's funny how that works because they are a media conglomerate. Every day they're profiling because it's their story that's out there. It's their ideology that's out there, their kind of take on the world that's out there. So interesting to come across this long form stuff. Believe in the serendipity of content. If content is out there and it's popular and people are really reading about it or sharing it and it's long, don't just say, oh, I'm not interested. There's a reason someone commissioned a thousands of word piece on it. It's going to be interesting. And you're going to find nuggets in there that will make you better for having read it and smarter across the board. And always kind of expose yourself to things like Glenn Beck. Expose yourself to things that maybe you don't think off the bat are aligned with your ideologies. Because sometimes having new stimuli added to the mix, the petri dish that is you, will actually help you. Even if it's something you don't believe in, it'll help you solidify that point. But just keeping it out takes you away from the experience of it. And that's an important thing. You never know how something might change you. The way the nodes in our brains are set up to kind of constantly evolve and constantly plug in with the other nodes, you really want to do that because that's what makes a fulfilling, diverse experience. This has been Matt McQueenie of the Mixed Minus podcast. And please keep subscribing and keep listening and watching and reviewing on iTunes, Stitcher, any podcast directory you can think of. Go to my website, MatthewMcQueenie.com. And if you have anything to purchase from Amazon, go through there. I will get a small commission on my end. You will not be put out any. It comes out of Amazon's take, not yours. So thank you again. This has been Matt McQueenie again. Over and out.